Good morning to everyone. I'd like to welcome our esteemed guests joining from across the globe. It's wonderful to have you with us today, and a warm welcome to our distinguished panelists. It is my privilege to introduce the Security Women's Side event during the 33rd session of the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice. Security Women is a global advocacy organization dedicated to advancing women, peace, and security initiatives. Today's panel discussion is entitled Empowering Women in Policing, Forensics, and Specialized Units in Combating Organized Crime. It aims to provide perspectives on women as indispensable technical and professional contributors to combating organized crime in the global south, and to highlight the need for equal representation in specialized units. This discussion aligns with the theme of the UNODC Gender Strategy 2022 to 2026, broadly supporting its goals to contribute to the delivery of global results on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and to strengthen the institutional capacity and effectiveness to enhance the delivery of results on intersectional gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. The expertise and experience of our various speakers today will underscore why gender inclusion is so critical to achieve gender parity institutionally while sharing a South African perspective. I am Laura Jane Watkins, a research associate from Security Women, and I will be moderating today's event. We also have members of Security Women joining us today, as well as the Director of Security Women, Dr. Juliet Coleman. We would like to kindly remind our participants to remain on mute while the speaker is presenting, and please post any questions you have for our Q&A session at the end of our panel discussion in the chat box provided. Joining me are four distinguished speakers, and I'll introduce our first speaker, Dr. Derika Lambrechts. Dr. Derika Lambrechts is a senior lecturer at the University of Stellenbosch. She has published widely in international South African journals and will provide an academic perspective on the intersection of gender and organized crime in South Africa. Our second speaker, Sharon Jafta, is a former South African Police Service Lieutenant General and has held various significant positions in policing. She was the first woman Divisional Commissioner of the Division Inspectorate in the South African Police Service. Her memoir offers an extraordinary account of women in policing when SAPS of the country underwent profound social and political change. Our third speaker, Laura Maton, is a senior forensic ballistics analyst within the SAPS service. With over 5 years of forensic experience, Laura will shed light on the crucial role of women in leading anti-gang forensic fieldwork, particularly in the Western Cape region. And finally, our fourth speaker, Nokuthula Nkonyane, a senior forensic analyst at the Royal Eswatini Police Service Forensic Laboratory, also serves as a part-time lecturer at the Reps Machapa Police Academy, teaching in the Diploma in Police Science program, and is a steering committee member of the Eswatini Women in Science, Engineering and Technology. Nokuthula will offer insights into the pioneering efforts of women in leading forensic science initiatives in Eswatini. And so together, our panelists will engage in this dynamic and informative discussion on exploring strategies, challenges, and success stories in promoting gender equality and women's participation in combating organized crime. So Derika, it's a privilege to hand over to you, and we'll start our panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Laura Jane. Thank you, Juliet and Security Women for creating this platform. Creating this platform for this incredibly important discussion. Okay, as an introduction to the conversation today, I will provide a brief overview of research on the topic of women and organized crime in Africa, with some specific examples from South Africa. In general, in organized crime research, the research agenda has been historically male-dominated. Not only did research focus on male figures and leaders of the underworld, but also male participation in organized criminal activities, the different roles that they take, how the gendered male identity frame organized crime, and of course, violence within the group and between rival gangs and cartels. This stretched over the full range of merchandise and commodities involved in organized crime trade. Now, over the past 30 years, the role of women in organized crime has been noticed in academic literature, but of course, with a very strong focus on studies from Latin America and Europe. Only in the last 10 years or so has research on women in organized crime in Africa become more prominent. Studies from the continent explore the roles, motivations, and experiences of women involved in various organized crime activities. Now, the theoretical frameworks for understanding women's involvement in organized crime have ranged from feminist criminology, gendered pathways theory, intersectionality theory, and ecofeminism and environmental justice, to mention a few. These theories expose the motivating factors behind female participation in organized crime in Africa: economic poverty and lack of employment, lack of access to education, and social and cultural factors. Furthermore, noticeable studies, for example, from Dr. Annette Hupschler in 2013, provides an overview of the various roles that women play in organized crime in Southern Africa: leaders, facilitators, smugglers, money launderers, cooks, and pimps. Each of these roles will be specific to the type of organized crime and transnational organized crime involved. Human trafficking, a very prominent theme, as victims and perpetrators, exploiting other women and children for profit, drug production, trafficking, smuggling of rare goods and artifacts, and facilitators of money laundering. Hupschler writes in an article with the title of Bogus Hunters, Queenpins and Mules, the varied roles of women in transnational organized crime in Southern Africa, on Madames and Bosses. I quote, "Evidence from the Madame role was found involving the infamous Aldina dos Santos, a case that gained notoriety in the South African media. The Mozambican national was arrested in Pretoria, South Africa in 2008 after holding 3 underage girls at a brothel in that city. She lured the girls to what they were told was the land of golden opportunities, where the promise of work in a hair salon in Pretoria. Kept against their will, the girls were made to watch pornographic movies, forced into prostitution, and Dos Santos pocketed their income. A South African woman was also found at the apex of transnational organ trafficking network, which abducted and killed children for the purposes of organ trafficking." End quote. Accordingly, what is important to note and what is a significant finding coming from the literature, is that the role of women in organized crime has changed, and it's complex. Women's involvement in criminal activities transferred from only the victim and the mother or the wife or the girlfriend of a prominent male criminal to be the perpetrator, sometimes in strategic positions. That said, the gender-specific experiences of women involved in organized crime, for example, exploitation and violent and forced coercion, should remain on the research agenda, especially as exploitation in the digital realm in Africa is increasing at a runaway pace due to the connectivity boom on the continent. I will elaborate on a point that I've mentioned earlier. In some cases, women become involved in criminal activities due to the need to provide for their families. In such cases, women face a very difficult dilemma. In gang-ridden communities of the Cape Flats, located on the outskirts of Cape Town, South Africa, a large segment of young men are caught up in the vicious cycle of gangs. This leaves the woman to provide for the family. In an area also plagued by poverty, executing small tasks for the gangs, such as hiding firearms or drugs in your house, becomes a viable source of income. Young women also often get caught up in selling drugs for the gangs, such as crystal methamphetamine, locally known as TIC, recruiting new clients, and prostitution. Of course, during a time of crisis, such as the COVID pandemic, poor socioeconomic circumstances intensified. During the pandemic, despite the national restrictions on movements, gang fights on the Cape Flats continued. The rise in gang shootings was attributed to fight to keep control of territory, enforced by strict guarding of territory and goods. Gangs clashed frequently for control over the licit, for example, the renting out of council houses, and also the illicit markets, most notably drugs and guns. Gangs also used this time for increased and active recruiting of gang members due to the sharp rise in unemployment and levels of poverty. A worrying trend that emerged was the increase in youth recruitment during the hard lockdown. Again, due to poverty, the prospect of employment, and a sense of belonging, and illicit activities to pass the time. During an interview for one of my research projects, a community activist described a mother's answer on how she can allow her 7-year-old son to join a gang. I quote, "Nobody cares what happens to him. Nobody cares what happens to us. We have no one to call on. The gang sees that the light is burning. We have a piece of bread, and at the moment, that is all we need to survive." End of quote. However, during the same study, it also emerged that mostly female respondents were involved in community organized projects. Examples included soup kitchens, feeding projects, neighborhood watch groups, and small-scale job creation strategies. Food distribution initiatives were funded by local non-governmental organizations, and produce donated by residents and local shops, or residents paid for the food out of their own pocket. As one respondent noted, I quote, "Yes, myself and a friend started handing out sandwiches to the kids in our street. From there, we made 1 pot of soup per week. And thereafter, we were blessed with basic food items and from family, friends, and neighbors. We could then make 1 pot of soup, 1 pot of food for our street kids and elderly. We started this without any financial support, but with 10 loaves of bread and 50 rand of bologna. During this period, we did this to ensure that residents do not go hungry during this time." End of quote. As mentioned, in the communities of the Cape Flats, there are many women actively fighting against the gangs, exposing another research area related to organized crime and women. These women head community policing forums, patrolling the street at night, with little to no assistance from the local police force. They put their lives on the line every single day to protect their community. Their knowledge of local gangs make it even more dangerous territory. A community leader from the Cape Flats was scheduled to testify during the trial of a gangster as she witnessed the gang shooting. She struggled to enter the witness protection program and received very little assistance from law enforcement. Another example where the current system of governance on the Cape Flats has failed. In an area dominated by male gangs, women are highly exposed as they walk the children to school, they take the sick and the elderly to the local hospital and clinic, and they must leave in the early hours of the morning to travel to the city for work. To conclude, and as you will hear from our other very experienced panelists, women are also, of course, involved in the formal state structures, the police force and specialized units fighting against organized crime in a very male-dominated environment. This may be the most under-researched topic related to women and organized crime and needs to become part of the research agenda. And that's why this discussion is so essential today. As researchers, we need to change the narrative of researching organized crime to be more gender sensitive and apply a much broader lens to investigate all matters related to organized crime on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derica. I think for the purposes of time, I'm not going to follow up with a question, but I think I will just move on to our next speaker, and we will then end with I'm sure we'll direct some questions your way at the end in our Q&A session. Thank you so much. Now introducing Sharon Jafta, over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning to our distinguished guest as well. I think speaking about the notable experiences in combating gang crime, my personal observation specifically, gangsterism within the Western Cape is an intergenerational phenomena that affects up to 5 generations at a time. It is a societal problem. And men are the gang leaders and are mostly active in the gang-related crimes such as house invasions, business robberies, street robberies, being the drug dealers and such crime, yes. And then women and girls, they normally dress according to the gang culture, and they would support them and would even take their tattoo. And their girlfriends and families are also pulled into gang activities by using their homes as storage places and drug outlets. They use places such as hairdressers and nail bars that you would see that has been established throughout specifically the Cape Flat areas in their homes. They use those as drug outlets and storage places. And what gangs currently doing, they identify very young girls at high school, grade 8, grade 9s, and link them up to become girlfriends with gang members. And they then offer these girls gifts such as brands, and they specifically target the poor areas and make them dependent on them. And gangs are also having soup kitchens and to feed the public in gang-ridden areas. They are then perceived as the good guys by the community. And then when the police are taking action against them, they are protected by such communities, because those communities will attack the police when the police come and raid the houses. And gangsterism has become a political tool to slander the ruling party. There is no concerted effort by government to prevent gangsterism specifically. Wives of gang leaders and mothers, in particular of boys in gangs, are being abused either physically or mentally by their husbands and their children. And the elderly parents of gangsters are abused also by them because they want to be the head of the home and they want to run the home. And then looking at how should we combat gang violence? I think specifically it's a societal problem that needs all hands on deck. All government departments and communities, NGOs have to work together to combat gang violence. It is just not the police that can combat it. So school safety programs is needed. There is specifically from South African Police Service, they've got a school safety strategy, but it needs to be implemented in every school. I think currently it needs a lot of work still. It is not implemented everywhere. And then also in those communities, there are no holiday programs for children. So when they are on school holiday, that's specifically the times that the gangs will be active in recruiting those children. And you find those children not going back after holidays, they become school dropouts. So integrated community-based school holiday programs have to be implemented in those areas to prevent those children to become school dropouts and to fall into the hands of gangs specifically. Sport against crime is also a strategy that can be used. The police service has got sporting codes, and specifically when we do the sport against crime, we would cordon off a street in front of a drug outlet, and we use the street to play sports in with the children. And that also becomes a space where you can gather crime intelligence and then operationalize after that. Then integrated projects with education department, social development, and police should be implemented. I've said already. And then boys and girls scouts, scout guides should come to these areas. You don't find scout guides in these areas, to train children basic life skills in gang-ridden areas. So it would be good that if girls and Boy Scouts guides can be implemented. And government should implement skills development programs for school leavers who are not able to study further, to equip them for the job market. Even those who don't drop out of school and they finish matric, they don't go study further, they can't find a job, then they fall into the hands of gangs. And that's the way out for them. And then awareness campaigns specifically on domestic violence and gangsterism, as well as elderly abuse, should take place in these places. I think that specifically if you look at mothers, what they are experiencing with their children that are involved in gangsterism. If you look at the phenomenon, most of the times the fathers are in jail. And I've said it is a generational problem, and the children will follow suit. So where the mother has been abused by the father who was who was in the gang, and now jailed, it's followed by the children abusing the mother again. Looking at the barriers in the workplace, specifically for women in combating gangsterism, the workplace culture is still there. It does not allow women to be in the forefront of combating. You would find always the men that is managing and that is heading the operations, in specifically combating operations. There's still bullying in the workplace. Sexual harassment is still rife in the police. The infrastructure is not in place to support women in operations. And that's across board, not just women combating gangsterism, but it's across board, women in operations. There's a lack of female leaders in the environment. There's still a lot of gender stereotypes, lack of flexibility in the workplace. Sexism is still rife in the workplace. There's a lack of mentors. In fact, the police do not have a formal mentorship program for women in operations specifically. There's a poor work and home balance. Women are not even allowed to have that balance. If they, for one or other reason, want to prioritize a family need, they are viewed to be not competent to do their work. So they're not even allowed to have a balance in the workplace. And the lack of support among women is also a problem, because you also find women not sponsoring other women in the workplace. And how can we overcome such barriers? Is always keep within the boundaries of the disciplinary regulations. Uphold the oath to serve and protect at all times. Make your principles and values clear in your workplace and do not depart from them. Work with integrity, commitment, and excellence at all times. Make sure that you are up to date with all standing orders, regulations, national instructions. Equip yourself through self-study. Learn to be assertive and speak out. Learn to manage the work egos in your environment. Keep your identity as a woman. And do not socialize in the workplace from the beginning. Do not entertain any small talk in the workplace. Know and understand the legal framework in which you function. And agree to act in vacant posts to be able to gain experience in other fields in the policing as well. And how can SAPS better support women in policing? I think is to specifically develop and implement a formal mentoring program for women in South African Police Service. Formal training for members working in specialized units specifically. They should also consist of compulsory training in the new laws. Should take place every time when there's a new law, there's no training on the law, but it should be compulsory. And then general detective courses must include basic training on the Poker Act. Because people don't understand, and specifically detectives don't understand the poker. The Women's Network and Men for Change should be taken seriously and implemented across board within the police. The SAPs must create career opportunities for women commanders and specifically in operations, organized crime, gang combating, etc. Succession plans must be in place for women. And women need to be appointed as project managers at station level already to prepare them to be project managers on higher levels specifically. Just in closing, looking at specifically barriers faced by women in forensic and organized crime, there's not a strong support network structure amongst women in organized crime. And there's no formal mentoring system in the field. Acceptance of women by male colleagues, especially peers, is still challenging. And women are viewed as being incompetent when voicing dissatisfaction about their workload and challenges. Commanders do not understand when women are experiencing PMS. We might think this lightly, but it does happen in operations specifically. Personal work boundaries set by women are not respected, and they are viewed as lazy and unwilling to fulfill a task when prioritizing a family need. They are still not viewed as the equal of their male colleagues. Promotion opportunities is little for women. An appointment of women as unit commanders is still a challenge, as there are not many appointed in such positions. Takedown and the period before takedown is very stressful for women. And I've heard the previous speaker say that this area needs more research. And specifically, I think this point needs to be included in that kind of research. There's no special allowance for members on such investigations. And organized crime units are still viewed as a man's world. Women are used to play a more proactive role. They are more responsible for the administrative part of the project, like data collection and analyzing. Men are better trained than women. They are trained in project management, crime scene management, investigation techniques, and the poker. Most women are partially trained and do not qualify to lead up the projects. And women are not used for interrogation of suspects. They rarely used for undercover, they only used for undercover surveillance as detectives. They're actually more prominent intelligence than detectives. And young women are recruited for investigation. And when they're married, they share information with their partners, and then they can't be part of such investigations. There's still cultural dynamics within the project teams. And when you're part of the team, gender dynamics is still at play. And they are not allowed to handle informers, only when it is linked to women and children. And women are allowed to carry a docket, but they're not allowed to be the head witness in court. Women are often exit the project when the time period of the projects are extended due to complexity. Women are normally of a junior level and are not part of the management meetings and decisions making, and they're not able to give input. And just in closing, women in organized crime are not able to live a balanced life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for those very deep insights and personal experience, as well as your recommendations in the institutional sense. I'm going to move on to the next speaker. We are a bit pressed for time, so I'll just hand over straight to Laura. Laura, welcome, and thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us here today and for giving me the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about where I come from, what I do, and how what I do plays a role in combating organised crime in South Africa. So as Laura Jane said, I'm Laura Mitten. I'm currently employed by the South African Police Service as a forensic analyst specializing in ballistics, and I hold the rank of a warrant officer. I knew from a pretty young age that my passion lies in forensic science. I've always been very fascinated with how the application of forensic techniques are used in criminal investigations to apprehend and to help convict guilty persons. So following high school, I went to Stellenbosch University to study a Bachelor of Science undergraduate degree in Human Life Sciences. And following this, I attended the University of Pretoria to complete both my BSc Honours and Master of Science postgraduate degrees in medical criminalistics. After completing my qualifications in 2018, I was then appointed by SAPS as a forensic analyst in the ballistic section of the Forensic Science Laboratory that is located here in Cape Town. I successfully completed an extensive 3-year in-service training program in all aspects of forensic ballistic science, including crime scene photography and management, as well as expert court testimony. I've been working in this role for a little over 6 years now, and I've examined over 1,500 cases. So South Africa has 4 forensic science laboratories that are located in 4 major cities around the country, and they service all 11 provinces. So this means that each FSL has a jurisdiction that extends beyond the province that it's located in, and it includes neighboring provinces as well. Now, within South Africa, gangsterism is most prolific here in the Western Cape province. And given that the #1 weapon of choice in gang violence is a firearm or a gun, our expertise as forensic ballistics analysts becomes quite pivotal in anti-gang efforts. It starts at the actual crime scene, and it is worth noting that roughly 90% of the crime scenes that we attend are gang-related. At the scene, we will analyze firearm-related evidence and their locations, number of shots fired, bullet trajectories and patterns in relation to bodies or the victim's positions. We will then also attend the postmortems to liaise information with the pathologist, and we basically try and provide a reconstruction of the scene. Following this, all the ballistics-related evidence that is recovered from the scene, as well as from victims, suspects, or persons involved, will then be sent to us at the lab to be analyzed using various examination techniques. These include, but are not limited to, firearm examination and testing, serial number restoration, because it's very common for gangs or gangsters to try and make the guns that they use untraceable by removing the serial number. We also examine and compare fired bullets and cartridge cases, either those that are recovered from the scene or that are taken from the victim's body, to determine how many guns or shooters were involved. And we also try and match these exhibits to a specific gun. We upload and acquire these fired exhibits from the crime scene or the test exhibits that we fire from the firearms we receive onto what's called our ABIS database, which then compares all of these exhibits that have been acquired on the system on a nationwide scale. This algorithm basically provides the possibility of linking fired exhibits from different crime scenes to the same gun, or matching one gun to multiple crime scenes. So in other words, it enables us to observe how a firearm has traveled and been used in multiple shooting incidences. Now, this information is of great importance to anti-gang efforts, since gang members will often commit multiple crimes using the same gun. So it allows detectives or the anti-gang unit to link multiple crimes to one gun, or to link a specific gang to multiple crimes, which then will not only strengthen the case against the gang or the gang member, but it provides the possibility to solve more than one crime. Lastly, we are also often called to court to provide expert testimony in these cases in order to assist in securing convictions against the accused gangs or gang members. Now, as a woman working in this role within this traditionally patriarchal and dogmatic organization, I've actually experienced quite a nuanced gendered perspective.
What was initially surprising to me is that the ballistic section is female-run and consists predominantly of women. Both our operations commander and ABIS commander are women, our head of training is a woman, our mentors are mostly women, and we make up the majority of analysts and admin staff. So within our lab-based environment, women are actually taken seriously, revered, and listened to. But I have found that our challenges as a gender actually begin out in the field and on crime scenes. Because in my experience, crime scenes tend to be very male-dominated spaces where women professionals are often perceived and handled as if we don't belong or we're out of our depth. Now, firstly, if it's an active scene, which most gang-related scenes are, safety becomes a big concern because we often don't have the police escort or the secure police presence that these scenes should have due to stretched manpower or limited resources. And secondly, we as female analysts are always struggling for the acknowledgement or the respect that is afforded to our male counterparts. So while men are perceived as physically robust, women are often seen as emotionally fragile and therefore incapable of handling the demands of crime scenes or the sight of dead bodies. Now, fortunately for me, from a safety standpoint, I have a male standby partner, but regardless of whether I'm the one that's actually in control of the scene at the time, the male detectives or the investigating officers will only address my partner and direct all questions and concerns to him. He's at least very aware of my frustration with this and will always reiterate to them that I'm the one that's leading this part of the investigation. But since working here, I have noticed that women seem to possess a higher observational and analytical intellect when it comes to casework or lab-based practices. And this is very apparent in the large gender disparity that we have in our work environment. And having reviewed many of my colleagues' case files, it's clear that women are more detail-orientated, systematic, and meticulous in their examinations. So when I look at these two perspectives, it's clear to me that women are best utilized and most effective when it comes to this analytical, observational side of an investigation. Now, I'm not saying that women should not be in the field. I'm just saying that rather than having to constantly struggle for the respect we deserve and to be taken seriously, why not utilize women's skills where they can be best applied and appreciated? So if women were in charge of the analytical side of an investigation, aspects like evidence examination, reviewing reports like witness testimonies, postmortem reports, etc., writing the technical reports, and essentially putting the pieces of an investigation together. And men were then responsible for all the tactical elements, such as house raiding, suspect arrests, interrogations, that type of thing. I believe that it would not only enhance the effectiveness of women in forensic roles, but the entire success of an investigation. Now, alternatively, when it comes to fieldwork, there are many instances where I believe that women would be better suited to these duties than men. So scenarios such as taking witnesses or victim statements, especially regarding victims of rape and sexual assault, the empathetic and more compassionate side of females would be significantly more comforting to these witnesses and victims, which in turn could yield a greater sharing of information and therefore value added to the case. But now, of course, I can only give my overview in terms of the forensic realm within SAPS, but reflecting on strategies such as the SAPS Women's Empowerment Agenda 2019 to 2024, it's clear to see that the challenges we women face are widespread across all facets or sectors of SAPS. This agenda has done a good job of highlighting the gender obstacles that are within this organization, as well as outlining strategic objectives of how to overcome or mitigate these challenges. But for me, the shortfall of this agenda has been its implementation. I don't believe in the last 5 years that the necessary outreach or training or awareness sessions have taken place in order to effect the change that's desired. Now, in my opinion, and this isn't an ideal world, I believe that the forensic science services should not fall under the banner of SAPS, but should rather be an independent body or organization on its own, which will then work in conjunction with SAPS rather than be a part of it. This way, you maintain the core of the service, which is science and not policing, and you minimize the politics and gender inequality that are endured within SAPS. So this way, women can be utilized more effectively for their forensic and scientific strengths without all the gender barricades that accompany a policing organization. It would also open up possibilities for successful career growth within the forensic science environment, as currently there are very little to no promotional opportunities within our workspace. So this then results in analysts applying to different sectors of SAPS just to move up in a rank or to get a promotion. So ultimately, this causes a loss of fully trained and highly skilled analysts and leads to what's essentially known as a brain drain. This is now especially frustrating for people like me whose passion lies in forensic science and not in policing. But like I've said, this is an ideal world scenario. So in closing, I think our commitment should lie in revising policies such as the SAPS Women's Empowerment Agenda with a more in-depth focus on the obstacles and imbalances observed in both the forensic science services as well as the other specialized units. And then ensure that the proper implementation and training of strategies like this agenda or the Women's Network programs in order to effectively confront and alleviate the gender challenges to enhance and ultimately optimize our capabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for those, particularly highlighting the current challenges within your field. I'm going to now directly hand over to Nokuthula. The floor is over to you. Thank you, sir.
So much for this opportunity. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Nokuthula Sibonobuthle-Ngonyane. I'm from the Royal Eswatini Police Service, and I'm very honored to be here to share about our experiences this side in Eswatini. I am a forensic analyst. I've joined the Royal Eswatini Police Service in 2013 and joined the Forensic Science Laboratory in 2015. At the time, I was the only analyst, female analyst who was there in the section that was the Royal Eswatini Police Service. It has now actually grown and extended, and I'm glad to say that more women have been joining the department and are part of the department as analysts and as well as playing other roles. I first started working in the chemistry section, and the interaction that I had then with organized crime involved investigation of murders, investigation of drug trafficking, which we had a lot of interaction with, and assisting the drug unit or the organized crime unit in solving some of these cases through forensic investigation. May I just check, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can, Nokuthula. However, if your video is lagging, then you're more than welcome to turn your video off, should that be helpful.
Okay, is it nagging now?
Yes, I think perhaps turn your video camera off. Yes, it is lagging slightly. Okay. Perhaps try to turn it. Yes, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. So coming into the Royal Eswatini Police Service, I was not necessarily the first woman to have been here. It's just I was the only one at the time that I came. I followed two women who were great leaders in establishing the Royal Eswatini Police Service, and I had to just ask the challenges that they faced. And what I discovered is that it was mainly, as it's been mentioned by the other presenters, it's just having, as a woman, especially in such a specialized voice, your views not being taken seriously. And that was the main Dr. Helen, who established the laboratory, the forensic science laboratory at the time. She had to leave because most of her views were not being implemented. She built a base for us that we came to stand on much more cultivated ground because of her effort. So those were some of the barriers that were experienced at the time. But moving on now, combating organized crime, we see that investigation is our Director General of Criminal Detection and Investigation Department for so long. And now we have also an acting national commissioner who is a woman. Both these women are part of the people that established what is called the Women Network in the Police Service, which comes from the initiative of they have been able to give us some strategies that will ensure and increase representation in the organization, both in investigation and in the general organization. And it has also influenced forensic science. So this starts with the recruitment to be represented in specialized. It must be supported by recruitment. And in the last recruitment, we had 40% women who were recruited, and then going on to training. In the overall training of the Royal Eswatini Police Service, 33.24% women were trained. Also, an increased number of women were promoted in the last promotions, which also included the promotion of our acting national commissioner and other women deputy national commissioners, which then promotes them to leadership roles, and then they can be able to have influence. Another strategy to increase the representation of women is the Eswatini Gender Network, as part of the SAPCO Gender Network, has operations that are women-led. They are called Basadi operations, which also happen annually in the Kingdom of Swaziland, where you find women leading in the investigation of organized crimes, in roadblocks, in raids, where most organized crimes are usually uncovered during those raids. It's only women that do that. And I feel it's a good strategy that the Gender Network is doing in our country and also in SADC to make sure that women lead and have the confidence in themselves. And this also improves supporting the women and in inclusivity. But today I just want to share about my experiences as a technical project lead of establishing the first DNA laboratory in Eswatini. I wanted to share my experiences and what I've learned through this project that has started a few years ago, but really started in earnest in 2020, 2021 until now. I feel honored to be part of the people that are leading this project as a woman, and what I learned about this, and when the opportunity presented itself, it was self-preparedness. As women in this specialized field, we really need to be prepared. We need to work towards preparedness. So in my case, I felt that my role in this was to break the existing barriers in the FSL. So not having a local DNA testing facility in our kingdom was a barrier. Not having a quality system, a working quality system in our laboratory was a barrier. And I made sure that I prepare myself by taking the available opportunity that the organization was giving through training and education. So what I did, I attended my master's in applied biology in Kyoto, Japan. And I also got an opportunity through the organization by the organization, because I also that is very key, that we let our seniors know exactly and don't go into our in voicing our interests. Because of that, I got an opportunity to be trained in laboratory quality management system. So I had the base of education. As I always say, that education may not be, especially in specialized units, it may not, it helps us to make for our vision, which then we can let other to fill the meat in the skeleton and frame in our approach towards what we wish to achieve in our units. The other thing that I felt was important as I went about this task of establishing this sector, what is to give clear direction and a clear voice. I think as women, clarity is very important as we are leading whatever projects that we are leading. And in my case, it's the DNA forensic expectations. What is the vision with clarity? Yes, sorry, may I think I may be out of time.
Hi, Nokuthula. Thank you very much. We're so sorry to have to rush you or cut you short. And unfortunately, we are experiencing some technical difficulties on your end, so the sound is lagging a bit. But we do look forward to, and I think I speak for the rest of the Security Women team, we look forward to engaging you further on your work, and particularly speaking to the gender challenges in Eswatini in the forensics services. I think if we could just conclude with final remarks, I think I would just like to, Nokuthula, just to give you a brief chance to wrap up that final thought, and then we can move to our Q&A session. And we were meant to end at 9:50, so if anyone does need to drop off this call, that would be entirely all right. And then we will just stay online to finalize our Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura, for that extension. Maybe in parting, what I wanted to really emphasize, especially in terms of pushing projects that will help in forensics, that also answers now to the questions of organized crime, because we become one of the main anchors to help organized crime, is for women to, first of all, to network, to find mentors in the space. Mentors are rare, but it's possible to find them. One of the things that has made our project to be very successful is through mentorship, and also it's teamwork. Never work on a project, especially a huge project, by yourself. Find a team to work with. This will also relieve you of finding yourself fatigued and failing, which we tend to self-blame a lot. So these are some of the lessons that I just wanted to share to women that will be going into projects, are into projects as we are. So thank you so much. The other things we can share as we continue. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nokuthula, and thank you to all our panelists for sharing their insights as well as expertise. And now I'd like to open the Q&A session. We have a couple of minutes to open the floor to anyone who has joined us for questions. Should no questions come to mind right now, I can start us off with a question. Would anyone like to? I see we don't have any questions in the chat. My first question would be to Derica. Just really interested in how we can better support research collaboration on gendered aspects of combating organized crime. I think you mentioned how that's one of the areas that are really lacking, and there are many stakeholders, including government stakeholders, that could be more involved. Where would sort of the point of departure be for a research collaboration?
Thank you for the question, Laura Jane. I think the point of departure is exactly where we are today. I think this is where the conversation starts. This is where the conversation starts between researchers and our other panelists working in the field. And this is where we should start to frame research topics and expose the things that Sarah, Laura, and Makutula exposed today. And I think all of them, as practitioners working in the field, they came through with the same narrative, the same things that we have to research. They exposed the same themes that need to be addressed within research projects. And I think for us as researchers, those are the things that need to go into funding applications, so that these type of themes can be exposed and better researched.
Thank you very much, Derica. I'm going to hand over to Julia, who has joined us, and she has a question. Thank you.
Oh, good morning, everyone. It's not so much a question, it's a comment following Sharon's talk. I'm sure Sharon will remember there was a South African Police Women's Network, and you raised all the points that we cover. I'm the first vice president of the International Association of Women Police. We encourage police women in different agencies to set up women's networks to deal with all those issues. And it would be lovely if South Africa recreated or reformed their network and joined with us. You had hosted us for a fantastic conference in 2012, and we would love to see South Africa grow again, their women's network, and come back into the fold. This is just a comment rather than a question.
Thank you very much, Julia. I'm sure Sharon may want to perhaps add to that in terms of what her SAPS Women's Network is leading on, and perhaps how we can all better collaborate to support that initiative. I think also, just to add on to a question directed at Sharon, is we know, Sharon, you presented such a wealth of experience in the 40 years that you have been in service. And I just wondered, maybe perhaps if you would like to share some of your reflections on the current policy or the strategy, which Laura mentioned was the SAPS Women's Empowerment Strategy of 2022 my apologies, 2019 to 2024. Perhaps you would like to just share those reflections that you have.
Thank you very much, Laura. Yes, the South African Police Women's Network was established in 2004. I have been one of the establishing members of the South African Police Women's Network. However, I've retired just after we have developed the Women's Empowerment Agenda, specifically, and the strategic plan 2019 to 2024. So I've retired in 2019. However, Julia, I agree with you that South African Police Service is no more present in that platform, and I'm privileged now to have just joined a team where we're going to do a review on the Women's Network strategy and the agenda specifically. The National Commission has approved it, and we have put a project team together to review the agenda and the strategy. and then to come up with a new strategy for the next 5 years. And I must say there is an appetite in the police to do so. However, the past 4 years was not easy years. It has just vanished, and we are busy trying to rekindle that specifically. Looking at the Women's Network, the agenda, empowerment agenda specifically, the agenda, the main aim of the agenda was looking at 60% of the agenda was development, and 40% of the agenda was taking social responsibility, looking at community policing, and specifically looking at relationships outside. However, I've noticed in the past 4 or 5 years that has changed. It is less than 40% development and more than 60% social, taking social responsibility. So I think SAPS has to change that drastically, because it's about development of women in policing, and specifically women in operations specifically. And I think the focus for the next 5 years should be there, so that we can have the women leaders at the forefront.
Thank you very much, Sharon, for that very comprehensive response. I'm noting that there certainly are many opportunities for partnerships, particularly on that the SAPS Women's Empowerment Agenda review. Then I'd like to just ensure that everyone has had an opportunity to ask questions. And I just would also like to note that Derica has had to leave the session. Any more questions from our participants? Or perhaps any of our panelists, you would like to ask any questions? All right. Well, I think that we have already gone well over time. We're already on 10:05 now. So I would like to then just officially wrap up our session today. Unfortunately, we did not have so much content and expertise and experience to cover in the allotted time, but I do expect that we will possibly look forward to more events, as well as shared best practices and expertise across our fields. I think just to conclude, there were some really pivotal takeaways from our session today. We've discussed how there is not sufficient and a lack of gendered nuanced research, which in organized crime, which then informs capacitating the police to specifically meet those gendered needs, and then also to achieve more effective policing and combating organized crime. We've also discussed how more women are needed, because they play the expertise, or rather the innate skills that women actually bring to specialized units is really important, because these are psychosocial skills that they bring to the table. And in order to really harness this potential, these women do need to be more capacitated, as well as a particular focus on empowerment through traineeships and training programs. And then we've also learned that despite various empowerment policies that do exist, these need to be properly implemented. They do need to be well funded, and they also do need to be up for consistent review so that they are effectively implemented. And I think many more lessons can be drawn from our discussion today. All right, well, I will then bid everyone good afternoon, and yes, enjoy the rest of the, I'm sure you will be joining for some of the main events and the rest of the conference. Juliet would like to say a few words.
Yes. Sorry, all I was going to say is thank you very much for all the speakers. I think it's been an excellent and really interesting discussion for each one of our speakers. And I'd just like to say that this is being recorded and it will be put on our website. So you can actually listen to it again if you want to on the Security Women website, which is securitywomen.org. Thank you very much, Laura Jane. And thank you to everybody. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Juliet. And yes, to reiterate, thank you very much to our speakers. What a privilege to hear from each and every one of you. Thank you, everyone.